Hey everyone, Brandon with FastDataScience.ai here, and welcome to another episode of This Week in AI. And if you'll notice right off the bat, there have been some additional changes to the show. And one of those changes you're actually looking at on the screen right now, and that is that I have created a new thumbnail. So before I get started with the show and the content today, I want to send a big shout out and a thank you to Manny Bernabe. If you're not already following Manny, he has a show called The Manny Bernabe Show on YouTube. He also promotes it on LinkedIn. He promotes it on Twitter. He's a great guy. He covers content in AI and IoT, things that are really similar to the things that I'm interested in. And I strongly recommend that you follow him. But Manny reached out to me last week and he said, "Hey, Brandon, I really think you need to up your thumbnail game." And he followed it up with a lot of really great tools and suggestions for me to do that. And so voila, here is the result of Manny's suggestions to me, my interpretation of it. And so for the near term, this is what This Week in AI should look like in your thumbnails coming to you through my YouTube channel. I also want to celebrate that I have finally surpassed 100 subscribers on my channel. I know my kids don't know 100 other kids, so I know that there are some people who actually care about some of the content and ideas and trends that I cover on this show. So for those of you who are watching me for the first time, This Week in AI is a show where I cover some of the latest trends in the news in data science, machine learning, and artificial intelligence. And I also try and provide a little bit of explanation on some of the data science and technology that I think underlies some of these trends. Another thing you'll also probably notice is I look a little particularly relaxed today. I've got my hat on backwards. I'm still in my PJs for that matter. And the reason for that is because I'm unemployed. Yeah, for the first time in many, many, many years, I don't actually have a full-time job. Now, I'm starting a new one in about a week, so don't worry, I'm covered. But I'm particularly relaxed and really excited to do this show. So I want to start this show off with a joke. And it's a really technical joke, so if you're not a data scientist, don't get mad at yourself if you don't get it. But it goes something like this. What did the coach say to the LSTM after it lost its race to the Transformer? Why couldn't you pay more attention? Okay, moving right along, let's talk about and get into the content of today's show. The content of today's show, as you'll notice, is titled AIDA or ADA. Basically, the show is actually a theme that I've seen recurring this month. I've seen more and more news articles that are talking about the coming together of what traditionally in the past have been perceived to be kind of two disparate fields. And that is robotics and machine learning or artificial intelligence. Bringing together those two fields and doing it in humanoid robots. So a few weeks ago, I talked about a robot called Amica, created by a company called Engineered Arts. Amica was unique and innovative because Amica could actually emulate human expressions in its face and had arms and limbs and so could do other things like act surprised. Well, a couple of weeks ago, they reported how they actually combined Amica with a large foundational language model in machine learning called GPT-3 in order to also provide Amica with the ability to interact and speak like a human and do it in an intelligent way because GPT-3 is actually pretty smart. It can answer questions pretty effectively. It can even write prompts and posts and is being used today to actually probably write blogs and content for people. And then we heard recently about how Elon Musk unveiled his prototype humanoid robot on September 30th during AI Day. He talked about his vision for how one day humanoid robots might actually help us in our homes and help us do common tasks. But in order to do that, we need to more effectively combine those humanoid robotics with artificial intelligence. And this week, we have yet another example of how humanoid robots are being combined with artificial intelligence in order to give the appearance of ever more intelligent things, beings, whatever we want to call them at this point. So today I want to talk a little bit about Ada. Ada, hit the news in this particular article. A robot testified at Britain's House of Lords and then had a breakdown, of course. So what's really interesting about Ada is Ada, one, was asked to give a political speech. So we know that this combination of humanoid robots with artificial intelligence has political consequences. In fact, it's demonstrated clearly in this article. Ada talked to the House of Lords about itself, how it understands, or at least was programmed to understand, that it is guided by a series of artificially intelligent models, that it has mechanical arms and limbs, and that there are tremendous opportunities in both the utility and creation space, as well as some potential consequences and concerns that politicians need to be aware of. And when asked a question by one of the attendants, one of the human attendants at the House of Lords, Ada actually had a little bit of a breakdown. And in fact, the creator of Ada, the inventor, had to come out and restart Ada. I'm not really interested in too much more about what Ada really kind of got into in the House of Lords, because that's pretty much it. If you want to learn more, all the links are in the comments and you can read the article yourself. But what I do want to talk briefly about is how this works. Like, what are our options? How can we make humanoid robots more intelligent by infusing them with artificial intelligent models or machine learning models? So let's briefly talk about some of the data science that underlies these different robots, these different humanoid robots, and how they can integrate with machine learning models. The way that I see it is that there are two predominantly different architectures that you could use, and both Amica and Ada represent each of those differences. So let me pop up a quick PowerPoint presentation. Hold on, let me just get this going. And talk a little bit about those two different architectures real briefly. So here's one way in which a robot could appear to be artificially intelligent. In this case, we have a person who says, "Hello, Body McBotface. What is the meaning of life?" And what happens here is that information may get translated into some information that's captured on a chip that's in the robot. That robot then has some kind of a network connection to an API. So it sends the transcribed digital version of that question that this person is asking to that API. That API then sends that data through a model that exists up here in the top of the stack here that scores whatever that question is in order to provide a response to another API that is then sent back to another part of the robot so that the robot can then respond to the question. And in this particular case, maybe the robot says something like 42. So this is how Amica worked with GPT-3. They actually enabled the ability for Amica to build a network connection to GPT-3's API, so that whenever you passed a sentence or a question or some content to Amica, it would transcribe it into digital content, send it to that API. That API would then provide a response by scoring it with GPT-3's models, and then boom, you get your response out of Amica. And it would say something like 42, I don't know. I really liked Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, so whatever. This is one architecture through which our humanoid robots can become even more intelligent. The problem with this, though, is all of these connections that you see here make it kind of slow. In fact, they make it really slow. They talk a little bit about how Amica's response did take some time. So, it's hard to develop rapport with somebody when they think a little too long to respond to your questions. So what's another architecture through which we could actually build artificial intelligence into these humanoid machines? Well, the second way that we could do it is by actually embedding the machine learning, represented by this little chip here. The model itself could live inside the architecture of the robot. That is, it could be in the hardware. So rather than having this database that lives somewhere else in a cloud, because it requires a really large compute resource in order to actually score and function and provide outputs, we could embed those models directly into the robots. So that when the question is asked, "Hi, Body McBotface, what is the meaning of life?" Well, Body McBotface can score that, transcribe it, and score it really quickly because it's all local, doesn't worry about any kind of network connection, and it can respond fairly quickly with 42. So there's a lot less time in between that interaction. The challenge here, though, is that a lot of these chips that are stored on these robots, especially the robots that get smaller and smaller and smaller, means the chips are smaller and smaller and smaller, which means the compute resources that are available in those chips are also smaller and smaller and smaller. So the models become smaller and smaller and smaller. That is, maybe they become less sophisticated. So what I want to leave you with today is to talk a little bit about the fact that Ada is constructed more in this fashion, where, or at least this is how I interpreted it. There wasn't a whole lot of information on the architecture of Ada, but based off of the way it was described, it sounded like this is how Ada was architected. That there are AI models built directly into the architecture and machinery of this particular robot. But what I really want to talk about is, let's get rid of this particular slideshow and talk about a couple of other articles that hit the news that are going to start impacting those diagrams that I just showed you. I think there's going to be a lot more work done to bring those machine learning models out of the cloud and all of those arrows that need to make those network connections and into the machinery, because of breakthroughs in some of that mechanical architecture. One of the news articles that hit the news wires this week is that water-based chips could be a breakthrough for neural networking and artificial intelligence. Wetware has gains and has gains an entirely new meaning. It has gains that provide it with an entirely new meaning. I think that might be a little grammatical error there. But nevertheless, this isn't the only example. There are a lot of other research teams, I guess you could call them, or collaboratives that are working on both new and advanced hardware, like water-based chips that could store information in different ways, or quantum-based chips, or even different ways of representing information on existing chips through something called boffins. Boffins are a new way to represent information that allow for a lot less compute resource without losing very much accuracy in the machine learning models that are using the information. Remember, all this information has to get translated into numbers. So boffins are a new way of representing numbers. They can cram even more information into ML models that may be better supported in architectures whereby the models are embedded directly in the robots that are using information to provide responses. So with that, I leave you with this. Please consider the implications, because not only do we see the implications in creation, do we see the implications in society, the implications that could be positive indeed, but are now maybe even starting to become political. Probably one of the areas that we're most far behind. In fact, next week on Tuesday, Manny Bernabe and I are going to talk a little bit about the 2022 report that recently was dropped on where the current state of AI is. And we will dive into some of those issues on Tuesday's live stream, where we investigate some of the results of that report on the state of AI. So I encourage you to tune in to that show next week. Hopefully you like my new thumbnail. Remember, again, like, subscribe, share. Hopefully this show is something that is useful for you and you get continued inspiration from some of the ideas that I share. And remember, the links for all of the things that I have shared here will be in the comments. And the last thing that I will leave you with is to remember not to just be data-driven, be data science-driven. All right, until next week, thank you very much and have a wonderful, wonderful week.